we moved to a place that was quite warm. Unfortunately, we moved to a place that was full of a thing called apartheid, which was really weird if you come from Leicester to go to a place called South Africa with apartheid, where segregation was the norm. We had fairly strict surveillance. There was a news store called the CNA, and you would go in to look at magazines from abroad, and the censors would either take black marker and take out the pictures of black people, because that was a bad thing to have in a paper, or anything to do with sex, right? Because South Africa was a very religious country at the time. So even if they mentioned like the word boob, it was cut out of the magazine. I was a young teenager at the time, and there was this thing called the internet that was popping up, BBS, and on BBS there were certain things that you could look at, certain things. So you took your telephone and you plugged, God, I don't sound like an old man now, you plugged it into this device that had like 2 suction cups, and then you dialed up to the internet. And inevitably you went to a place where young teenage boys like to go. And you started to download stuff. All right? Head. This was dot matrix. Head, neck, oh shit. Shoulders, Jesus, shoulders. We've got shoulders. Oh my God, we're going down. We're getting to the good stuff. And then the line would go dead. Because either your mum and dad would pick up the phone or your sister would be on the phone. But the cool thing about that was it really got me excited into how we could start to play with information. But now we're in the 4th industrial revolution. We're in version 4. Now, what's cool about this is that it's all about the cybers. Right. The official thing is that it's the 4th industrial revolution represents a fundamental change in the way we live, work, and relate to one another, enabled by technology. But we all know this is about the cybers, right? Because the geeks have inherited the earth, right? We were once laughed at. 1984, a really cool movie came out called The Revenge of the Nerds. Anybody saw it? Ha! Who's laughing now? Jocks. We are incredibly powerful people. You know, if you look at the top business leaders in the world, Elon Musk, nerd. I don't want to mention Mark. Anyway, he's okay. But lots of people involved in tech are seriously impacting how we live. And I think that makes our industry incredibly exciting. Because Hollywood finally got right what it is to be a hacker. Anybody not seen this series? No, thank God for that. One. What was cool about this is that they used, finally, consultants from within our community to actually depict hacks. A year and a half ago, I worked with a movie producer and Mel Gibson's son to do a movie on hacking. The problem with hacking is that it's incredibly boring. There is nothing visual. My background has been in fashion and art and photography for a very long time. You have directors going, make it look sexy. Is this not working? Wait, sorry, hang on. My terminal's gone missing again. Exactly, right? But what Mr. Robot did was it gave normal people an insight into how easy it was to subvert and control people. And I think this was really important. Because prior to that, we still had scenes like this. I mean, I struggle with code most of the time, but I've never done a double-handed keyboard thing before. But finally, us cool nerds were finally seeing as, hey, you are quite cool people. Now, any of you gone home at Christmas and had your family go, you work in computers, can you fix? That is one of the downsides of our industry. So those getting into the industry, I'm warning you, it will happen. Believe me, Windows 10 updates, you're going to be dealing with that for life. But the cool thing is we have people like this. His name is Michael Ramos. He is the San Bernardino's district attorney. And he came up with the best quote I've ever seen in my life. A lying, dormant cyber pathogen. Now, for those who are coming into the industry and doing report writing, you get 100 points if you can get that into a report. Right? A client knows that when that's in the report, shit got real. Right? But more importantly, we now saw the crossover between technology and normal daily lives. And this case came about because a terrorist had made a nasty event happen, and they unfortunately used an iPhone. And at the time, the iPhone was considered to be very, very secure. Not so much at the moment, especially if you're Jeff Bezos. But, you know, the phone is pretty good. But we also then have the FBI doing something that was phenomenal. Because now they have a dedicated page for cybers, right? Which if you understood and worked with the FBI closely, this was quite a significant change for them. It is mostly made up of Chinese and Russians. There's a weird anti-Russian thing in America at the moment. I don't know why. But in all fairness, the Russians are pretty good at hacking stuff, right? Chinese also too. But that goes into the massive pace of technology that we're seeing at the moment. And my day job is keeping 140 odd million people safe for a fairly small bank. And we look at how technology is really changing how people bank. And one of the first ones does anybody remember this? Yeah. God, the internet was amazing back days with the memes. We also had weird ones like Goatsa. Thank God that's died out really. Awful story. DEF CON 5, we were in the Alexis Park. Wireless was really becoming, Jesus, I sound like an old man. Wireless was becoming a really cool thing. And it was okay to hack other attendees. So I thought it'd be really clever to do a replace of everybody browsing the internet. All their images were replaced with Tub Girl and Goatsa. I am so very sorry. It was childish as hell. It was funny at the time. Don't Google those images, please. But what we've seen now in the last couple of years is an explosion of technology like I've never seen in the last 2 decades. So there are, give or take, 5.1 billion mobile users. It's very hard to understand how many, but there's a lot of people that use mobile phones now. And WeChat Pay, for me, is the story of how growth really happens. So for those who aren't heavily involved in the Chinese way of doing things, WeChat, WeChat Pay, and Alipay are two very, very big payment methods. So in China, if you want to send payments, you don't use your credit cards anymore. You don't go to a bank, you use WeChat Pay. You do it via WeChat. And it's a phenomenal ecosystem that grew really well. The story of WeChat Pay, for me, is the best because prior to that, Alipay was king. Right? You didn't really send money outside of their ecosystem. And WeChat came in and they decided, we're going to build a tech ecosystem that's going to grab a lot of users. And they decided to look at two ways of doing it. The first was they were going to use WeChat, make it incredibly easy to send money and receive money, seamless and secure. But secondly, they tapped into the red packet culture of China. You really understand what the red packet culture is. Good. So 2. So we're in Chinese New Year's at the moment. It has been cancelled, unfortunately. Let me tell you, flying into Heathrow at 11:30 last night is quite scary. But unfortunately, you see lots of people coming in from China. You're like, oh shit, I am running. But tradition this time of year is that your boss would give you a red packet with a little gift as a job saying, well done, right? A couple of dollars and such. It became a bit of an annoyance for the employer to have to go to an ATM, draw out cash, find an envelope, cut his tongue looking at doing that kind of stuff. So what WeChat decided to do was they were going to create a digital red packet. And they managed to do the code in 3 weeks from idea to conception. And that first New Year's Eve in 2014, 16 million were sent, which is not bad going for an initial proof of concept version 1. 11 months later, in 2015, 1 billion red packets were sent. That is a phenomenal increase in banking, financial, and security type functions. And it just shows how pace has really changed quite heavily. Now, it also took WeChat Pay only 6 months to get to 130 odd million customers. Something that the rest of the world just can't seem to fathom. And this is technology that we're all building and involved with. So it is quite fascinating. But sadly, we're just not very good at building secure stuff. And it's really hard because, as somebody who's worked in the industry for such a long time, SQLi turned 21. When it came out, it was 98. I was working at the Financial Times. There was no such thing as a penetration tester job then. I was working as a security engineer building the first .com, and we had to break stuff, and SQLi came up. And I thought, this is fascinating. Prior to that, you were doing network level type vulns. I went to the head Oracle developer, Paul. I was like, hey, we've got this cool new unbreakable database. Marianne says so, and it cost a fortune. But I'm getting ORA errors back, which is like the Oracle errors. And Paul was like, it's fine. I'll filter them out. You'll never see them. We all know where that went. There are some things that we still struggle with. But what was interesting about this one is that the threats that we saw in the 90s and the early 2000s haven't really gone away. And, this week has been a phenomenal week for attacks. So whilst technology is really growing, we still suck at making stuff really, really secure. And a big chunk of that has to come into how we look at politics. Now, as sad as it sounds, this is cliched hell, our weapons are our keyboards. For the last 7-8 years, I've been quite heavily involved with the cybers for our cousins across the pond, mostly Cybercom and other agencies, hence the cyber jacket. And for the first time in history, you no longer need boots on the ground. And we've started to see a lot of that classified information come out, where people are able to take control of other countries by doing simple cyber campaigns. And sometimes the hacks are really good, but for the best part, the hacks are quite amateurish. And they don't need to be clever, because it's quite trivial to gain access to a critical infrastructure. It's quite trivial to gain access to, say, Democratic National Committee, who don't use 2FA on their Gmail account, and you could use that to do something else nasty, supposedly, right? So it makes total sense for governments to start looking at our industry, start looking at what we're doing, and adopting them. And that kind of drew home for me around about 2005, in Vegas. I've been involved with Black Hat since 2002, DEFCON prior to that. And prior to, 2005, when we started to see the feds, there was the game Spot Fed. And it was very easy to spot a Fed, right? Slacks, generally cream. Boat shoes, you're in the middle of Vegas, son, I don't know what's going on there. Golf shirts tucked in, and a very neat haircut. Right? Generally, at the time, Black Hat and DEFCON were full of people wearing latex. You stuck out, right? But the FBI and other agencies saw the need to gain people like us back into the fold. Because, we started to see how easy it was. Now, for anybody who's not been following this story, it is a fascinating look into, one, how not to do forensics. I think we just need to call it out there. Two, if you're going to send dick pics, don't use your normal work phone with Saudi prince, right? I think that's probably the biggest advice I can give, right? He built a thing called a fire phone. Jeff, use your fire phone for your fire in your pants. But for now, we're starting to get people who've never understood how easy it is to take control and subvert people via exploit code now on the front pages. And I think this is a good thing, because this taps into a message that a lot of us inside the community have really wanted people to realize for a long time. We have no regulation. Now, this all happens because this charming gentleman, he's an interesting character. He's decided that rather than go down the traditional method of keeping his opponents quiet, he would adopt the use of technology, just like WeChat Pay and everybody else. The problem is that he used a company called the NSO Group. Now, NSO Group are not a very nice company. In fact, I liken them to one of the cancers of the internet. Because what NSO Group does is sell misery and pain to the highest bidder. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is that when the Snowden leaks came out, they thought that the intelligence community or Five Eye had a free remit to do whatever they wanted. Yes, the people in Cheltenham did bugger up a bit with Belgicom. But for the best part, there's a lot of checks and balances. One can't simply just pwn everything. These guys do. And they generally do go after countries and governments who have no moral fiber. And unfortunately, it started a trend of where these governments were now using technology to really start to mine people. This year alone, we heard how China had built probably the biggest surveillance systems against the Uyghur Muslims. Did anybody read into this? They were using technology like I've never seen. They were using surveillance at scale. They were using machine learning. They were using AI. They were using Western technology and Western code found in GitHub and proof of concepts that we've done at conferences to seriously track a part of the Chinese population that they did not like. And for us, it was interesting because we never got a glimpse of this. Chinese hackers, whenever they would submit to Black Hat, you would occasionally get some cool stuff, but they weren't sharing country secrets because they weren't allowed to. The MSS, the security services, would never let them do that. So we never got insight of what they were doing. But the internet's really hard, right? Because we all know securing stuff on the internet sucks, even if you're the Ministry of State Security for China. If you put certain databases on the internet, there are people out there who do find said databases. And to a degree, it's really good, because this was the SenseNet database that they left on the internet. And the amount of data that it had on people was shocking. We'd never really seen this level of detail before. And to give you an idea, 6.7 million location points linked to people, tagged with descriptions such as mosque, hotel, internet cafe, and other places where surveillance cameras were likely to be found. Now, this was scary because it showed what happens if you can throw enough budget at something, you can start to really track the population. But it didn't stop there, because AI and ML is all the rage, right? And anybody who's done it before knows you need to train your models. What better than creating an app that allows you to do face swapping? Because everybody does this. Did anybody used to do the app where they made your face look old? Nobody did that, really? That was a lovely machine learning exercise. But China just decided to do it. So it was the most downloaded app in the Chinese App Store. It's called Zhao. It wasn't available to anybody outside China. Okay. They like their own people. But what was interesting was this really did start to train models. And this technology was used for further surveillance of Uyghur Muslims. So it's interesting because that then thought, well, that will never happen in the West, right? We're really, really good about this stuff. Then Christopher Wiley came into our lives. Now, we're all part of that lovely experiment called Brexit, or as I like to call it, PsyOps on steroids. And what Chris did was he thought, I'm a technologist. I don't like what's being done with the technology. I needed to become a whistleblower. And he gave his insight as to how big and powerful Cambridge Analytica actually was. And I urge you to watch one documentary called The Great Hack on Netflix. It is a phenomenal piece of reported journalism, because you start to understand and go, wow, we were fooled like mad. And they weren't doing anything that fancy, because we were giving them the data, right? We were downloading the apps. We were going onto Mark's Facebook. We were liking stuff. We were feeding these massive machines of surveillance, and all they had to do was just listen and collect. So that started a downward spiral for me, where I started to really rethink about what I was doing on the internet. Prior to that, I ran a company called SensePost. SensePost still is very heavily involved in the offensive world, and we've trained special forces and we've done lots of stuff with agencies, and we do write and deliver a lot of tools. Now, call it naivety, call it immaturity. We always had a fear that the tools we release were potentially being used for bad, but we never had that proved. Up until APT33. Anybody know APT33? Charming bunch of people. Well, unfortunately, APT33 made use of a tool that we released called Ruler. Now, Ruler was interesting because Etienne, we were on assessment, Etienne found the flaw. He was like, you always go through that imposter syndrome when you find a bug like this, where you think, this seems too easy to manipulate Microsoft Exchange, to create malicious mail rules that deliver a payload, then clean up afterwards and carry on. And we tried to report it to Microsoft, and they just didn't want to know, which was the start of a very frustrating journey in vulnerability disclosure. But it turns out that APT33 really liked this method, and indeed so did many other people. And we did release the code, and we then had one of those oh shit moments, because we started to see how this was being used. And it wasn't the first time. Drydex used our DDE vuln, which, believe me, is not a cool thing when you finally figure out that this piece of ugly malware is busy using something that you've released. And then one of my colleagues, Glenn, he wrote a tool called Reader, which was a reverse proxy type tool when you're on an internal network and you can't get out. That was used by another group called Night Dragon. So we now started to seriously doubt what we were doing, because we're arming people in doing bad stuff. We're no longer giving a proof of concept, we're doing stupid stuff. And then the Fat Man came. And the Fat Man is Kim Yong. And what was interesting about Kim was that, prior to Lazarus becoming a thing that everybody knew about, we never really saw how well you could organize a state-sponsored type financial hacking team. This feedback's bad. Everybody kind of assumed that it was easy to break into a bank. But the biggest problem that pen testers have when you break into a bank is, what do you do with the money? And there's the line between a pen tester and a criminal. Criminals know how to move money around the system. Politicians do too. But that was always the difference. And what Kim did was, he weaponized pen testers to become very, very good financial hackers. Teams that basically, if they didn't do that, their families would be taken off to a gulag. Nothing like a Friday report pressure than your mum and dad pissing off to the mines. But he was also very good at moving the money around because he did one thing right. How do you deal with North Korea? As a bank, if North Korea comes after us, we can't call the local police. They don't know what to do. We could take it up to a step to government, but then it gets awkward because then it becomes government policy. And Kim's a bit of a firebrand. He has a lot of weapons and he likes horses. So you're generally not going to try and piss off the fat man on a horse, right? Because it could be quite bad. And that led to Lazarus raping and pillaging a lot of banks. Estimated at the moment it's about 2 billion he has stolen. And 2 billion he has laundered through the world, which is a phenomenal thing because it's not really widely reported on. But what Kim did was, he really started to look at how, and I say Kim because we don't really know, bar a couple of names, who the people are. They started to look at the computer security industry really, really closely. All right? So, on the left is the sample of the malware for the SWIFT system from Bangladesh. On the right was one that was used a couple of months after that. Now, for those who aren't familiar with assembly code, what that shows is an evolution of how they were defeating Yarrow rules. They were doing subtle changes to the code. They're so subtle because they knew exactly how the threat intelligence world went. Now, I've been ranting against the threat intelligence world for a very long time because I feel at the moment it's a race to the bottom, and I apologize for any threat intel people in the room. You can throw stuff at me later. But we seem to have this passion and pleasure at the moment where we want to say, hey, here's a new APT group. These are the tools they've used. This is where they failed. Here's the code. Here's some samples. Here's how they nearly got away with it. Call me blonde and stupid. If we did that with normal criminals, we might be in a bit of trouble. So what we're doing is we've turned our entire industry into a human virus total API submission. So if you are an APT crew and you want to check that your malware works, maybe just drop it on a network where you know you're going to get caught. You have free reverse engineering by lots of people desperate to get it out, and you'll probably get it done in 12 hours. We're arming these people to get better. And Lazarus really learns from the industry. And like fair play as a photographer, like these are pretty impressive photographs. I wouldn't like to be the photographer who took that because you can imagine messing his picture up, But, right, what we learned from Lazarus was the attackers had a foothold in the company for over 7 months. That's scary, right? The malware was compiled days or sometimes hours before it was deployed. They were able to modify their tools and their frameworks really, really quickly, which shows that they were watching the watchers. And the attackers often use instant-looking decryptors, right? They understood the security products that we sell, right? These are not stupid, lame hackers. These are really, really good criminals. And I think that's where our industry kind of went a bit wrong. Because, right, they were like normal people. Right? If you look at what we do, Monday morning we go and do a pen test or do some research, we have lunch, we go home. These attackers were doing exactly the same thing. They weren't scratching an itch. They were looking at doing stuff because their boss told them to do. And they had quotas. And what we've learned now about a lot of the Lazarus group is that a lot of the times they did have financial quotas. By Friday afternoon, you need to have stolen $2 million. Right? It makes a lot of difference to trying to find some SQL injection in an application that's really secure. Right? Let me tell you. But nothing prepared me for what happened next. All right. This is APT 41 China. I'm tired of the names. I'm really struggling with the moment. But APT 41 China looked at Lazarus and looked at the other things and said, hold my beer. Because they just did something that I never thought they'd do. They took all this communist experience, they took all what they've learned, they took it stealing stuff, and they thought, do you know what? We're going to help our country. All right? This is the C919. It's a great plane, and as you can see, it's made up of a lot of parts around the world, right? So when you make big planes today, there isn't a single manufacturer. Now, China at the time, and still today, has a program where it's basically China first, right? So they want to advance the Chinese state, they want to advance their capabilities, and they thought, you know what, right? We need to build this plane because the Chinese middle class was growing. Air travel inside China was massive until the virus came out and you get quarantined. But they thought we have to build a plane. And they went through all the details and thought, oh crap, there's a lot of companies there that we have to work with. Wait a minute, we've got this really cool group of kids in MSS and 61398 and all these other places where we can have some fun. So what China did was they decided to basically own a big chunk of the world's aviation industry and steal data. Now, one of the things they had to do was build an engine, right? Because without an engine, it does really well. So this is the LEAP 10 engine. It's a commercial joint venture with a French company, CFM International. China went to the company, signed the deal, everybody was happy. Things were looking good. But then China said, no, they didn't say that accent, it'd be really weird. They said, we're going to make our own. So they did. It looks very similar. I am not an aviation expert, but the engine is pretty similar. And it didn't just stop there. There were multiple similarities, dimensions, turbofan blades. Basically, it was an Apple C, Apple V. The French were confused. How did this happen? I do not understand. He was like, I don't know what's going on. There he is saying, this is the Chinese engine of the future. Behind the scenes, China got back to something that the West forgot about for a very long time. That beautiful, beautiful art of human. We became obsessed with SIGINT and OSINT. We love signals. We love technology. But human beings are weak and easily to be manipulated, right? And China was very good at this. So what they did was they planted a lot of models, and this specifically was MSS, Ministry of State Security. And they put all these various SSD actors in companies that had access to a lot of information. We all hear about insider threat. We all hear about the potential for exfil. This was the exfil, right? These were people that were sleepers for many, many years. We're not talking 3 months. We're talking 6, 7 years. They had relationships with people. They didn't flag any alerts. But they were carefully, slowly exfiltrating data about the C919 engine and the LEAP engine because it was part of the deal. And it was a great awakening for me because a lot of these people in this, they aren't hackers. They're just normal soldiers. But they were getting that information from somewhere. They were learning from us. They were watching us. And if you've ever been to any of the large conferences now around the world, you will generally see a mixture of people like us and those who work in government organizations, because that's how information is now spread. And that leads me to the NSO group. Anybody here not heard of NSO group? Okay, quite a few. They're a charming bunch of Israelis, like I said, who love to peddle misery for the high price. And they built a system called Pegasus, and basically, if you could imagine writing a commercial malware C2 delivery framework, that would be it. What we saw with Hacking Team when they were owned is that they didn't do anything very special. They used Adobe Air to make it very operator friendly. Because anybody who's done this kind of campaign with C2s knows it's fiddly as hell. Right? Stuff never works in technology. And if you're paying $15 million, which is how much Pegasus pretty much costs for a 3-year deal, it needs to work. So they built it round, and the data acquisition was very simple. Right? Jeff knows this really well. If you send it to a target, generally you're going to have access to all the kind of stuff. And they do through the use of ODE. At the time when Natalie from Project Zero looked for the WhatsApp call, that bug was being sold for $15 million. That was the remote RC that broke the trusted environment in the iPhone. That was a $15 million bug. And that's what they were using, right? Get access to a target and pull it out. But that's always day one, right? Because the people buying this technology aren't interested in the target per se. They're interested in what that target can give them. And there was a case in Mexico. I spend a fair amount of time in Latin America. And this is where we saw this kind of working. In 2016, Mexico saw sight and thought, sugar is really bad. Ironic that it's the home of El Chapo, who has another white product that gets exported out of Mexico. But they thought sugar was bad, right? And rightly so. And they had a lot of people around it to do a sugar tax. Well, it turns out the sugar industry didn't really like that. So the sugar industry approached a company who could help them. And that company was NSO. And they started to do a whole lot of social engineering campaigns against the activists who were trying to do sugar. This is one of the texts that was sent. It was sent to one of the people involved. They managed to do a great amount of OSINT on the person, and it basically said, your daughter was just in an accident, she's in grave condition, I hope you can come here, here's where she is hospitalized. Now, a lot of you who think, oh, idiot, why did he click on that stuff? I can tell you as a father, you click on that shit. If they get you in a stressful moment when your guard is down, you will click on that because it's your family. And these campaigns are very good at it. Jeff Bezos, a very rich and powerful man. You'd think he has the technology, the mindset, the training, the OPSEC stuff to not do it. He still clicked on something, right? So a lot of the times this works really well. And that gave them access to everything they needed. So we've now weaponized an industry where we're teaching people how to do social engineering and target people and so on. So how do we get there, right? Like I said, so this hasn't always been the way. And right at the start of the turn of the century, like when the hacking industry was still relatively new, we were shipping a lot of exploits out, right? It's not something I'm that proud about anymore, but we would find bugs and stuff, and we would use the exploit for a while and break into a lot of stuff, and then we'd share it with various groups. In the UK, we had a crew, I'm not going to name the name, but we worked quite closely with a lot of the teams, THC, ADM, etc. And at the time, I was working at PSINet. I was stupid because web hosting was really expensive, right? And I started a project with a friend of mine called Smoothwall, and we were building stuff up, and I found a vulnerability in SSH, and I needed to put it somewhere. So I borrowed a Sunny 50 in PSINet's data center, and then that IP address there was a fairly wacky server. And I thought, let me just put the patch up there, right? But at the same time, I was also having an exploit for that, sharing it with friends, right? Because that's what you did, right? It was just the 90s and the early 2000s, so we did. And it was really stupid. That was the community at the time. But that all changed when friends of ours, called Gobbles, came across this bug. Anybody remember this bug? For me, this was the watermark. This is when it all changed. CV 2002-039 was an Apache 1.3 bug. It was the chunked encoding, which is why your joke was terrible. But basically, it was interesting because at the time there was this amazing threat intelligence company called Internet Security Systems, Chris Klaus, and their experts said it was not exploitable. Right? We have the best in the world. It can't be exploited. Gobbles came in and wrote an exploit, and that was called Apache Nose Job. And that worm and that exploit caused a lot of mayhem on the internet because it literally caused crap everywhere it went. Because people in the industry were going, well, it's not exploitable, so I'm not going to patch it. I'll do a patch in 6 months. A bit like this recent Citrix one. Anybody here manage Citrix? I am so sorry. Don't ever look at the Citrix code base, whatever you do. It's literally a homage to 1990s PHP. Companies didn't patch because these experts were saying it's not exploitable. Well, it was exploitable. And then, every couple of years we have a massive chat. Normally IRC, we move from IRC to something else. Here's my friend Azira, or Fox01. She finally had enough, and she's an amazingly talented woman. I am very glad I'm not starting out in the industry now because you're all way more clever than I will ever be, and Maria is one of them. But she said, responsibly disclosed bugs published with a proof of concept are doing more harm than good since they're being weaponized and used by attackers. She was destroyed for this tweet. Mostly by the tech bro community, mostly by people who've never written an exploit before, mostly by people who've never actually broken into anything. But they're like, I've got to have my proof of concept because that's how the internet works. We've been having this argument for a very long time. Actually, we've been having this argument since 1999, when EL8, a phenomenally great group, published the manifesto of Project Mayhem. Everybody here ever heard of Project Mayhem? Project Mayhem was kind of needed at the time because there was lots of exploits, lots of people getting broken into, and it was relatively simple, right? It was stop publishing your shit on the internet with exploits because it's really bad because people are learning from it. And it was important. They went around, they hacked Theodore Rart, Doug Song, who's now a multi-gazillionaire, lots of people. But this one impacted me really closely because I ran hack.coza. Hack.coza, we think, was one of the first exploit archives out there, where if you had an exploit, we built a lovely little archive page where you could download an exploit. And it was really interesting because hack.coza, man, everybody wanted to own hack.coza. Because, if you're going to own the exploit archive, GovBoy did have a lot of ODA at the time. Generally, hackers are really bad business people because we used to give away ODA for free. Now you've earned a fortune. It got to the point where it was so bad at one point, we got these new boxes in the data center, Cobalt Rack 3, and it was running a MIPS processor. So we thought no shell code is going to run on that, and some bastard managed to wipe MIPS ODA, owned that box as well. But it was interesting because we were targeted. And we're like, well, we're not doing anything wrong. We're just shipping code. It's meant to help the defenders, right? Bullshit. All right, and anybody who seriously believes that ODA and proof of concepts helps defenders has never really defended against a lot of attacks, because it doesn't. So this was the site, by the way. It wasn't bad for the 90s. It worked. But it started a wave of people getting very, very angry against lots of people pushing out this information. Like I said, we've been having this argument for a very long time. And it's when you go, you know what? Something has to change. So my whole point of this keynote is kind of don't stop what you're doing, right? You are probably going to do amazing stuff. Just remember there's lots of people watching what we're doing. We are stalked, we're watched, we're liked, they watch our GitHub repos. They really start to understand what we're doing is bad. And this kind of hit home when I started to look at how have some of the things that I've been involved in made malicious. SensePost had a thing called Polish Friday, and we also had 20% research time. What that means is if you give people who are crazy, talented, have an itch, and like tearing stuff apart, generally you're going to have a lot of stuff that goes in the internal blog. Quetzal was one of them. Chris is a great guy. He's now working for Heroku. He was like, how do I easily backdoor Android applications without Google knowing about it? I'm going to call it Quetzal. He did. That got nailed everywhere. That was a bad thing. Luckily, we've got something to track where they're being used, but a lot of people using technique. You then had the infamous Snoopy thing. Snoopy was an amazing episode for me because it was a time when we were looking at how mobiles could be, changed and tracked, and we didn't expect people to do bad stuff. They generally did do bad stuff with our code. So much so, the bins where we were working were turned into passive surveillance devices using the Snoopy technology. About a year and a half ago, I heard that people in Palestine were being tracked using Snoopy drones. It's really not a cool feeling because it was never meant to be like that. But, right, good things came out of this. The anti-security policy. It's a very old policy, and I think it's maybe time we start revisiting this policy. And the policy is quite simple, right? A lot of people are going to disagree with this, and I like this. We should foster discussion. Don't tell the world about the security bugs you find, because a lot of times people aren't going to patch them. If the exploit leaks, notify the vendor. This is an old policy, but there's still a lot of truth in what it's saying. Because, if you look at the Pulse Secure, or the VPN vulns, they're still being exploited now. We've still not patched a lot of these bugs, right? And people are being taken left, right, and center. So something has to come in. And you even have really, really intelligent people, right, who are opposed to this. So Maddie is part of P0, good friend, and I also agree with her, right? She also kind of thinks that providing proof of concept helps defenders more than attackers. And I'd love to hear from everybody here. Who's in a defensive role at the moment? Do you honestly feel that proof of concept code pushed out to GitHub helps you do your job better? Because patching is hard, right? One simply just doesn't patch like that, right? Ask Equifax. Stuff is really hard. But to start wrapping up, we're also getting back to some very, very cool parts. There is a talk on this. This is Phineas Fisher. I really like Phineas, or Phineas's, whoever they are. Last month or 2 months ago, they decided to offer a 100K bounty to hack companies doing bad things. It's very bad, don't hack companies. But it's quite cool to see that the hacker spirit is still happening. And then us old farts are starting to look at you, the new generation, to say, we can't wait to see what you're doing. So Dino and I are really good friends. Dino wrote Karma, which was the start of all the wireless hacking stuff in 2004, 6, something like that. We can't wait to see what people are now doing based on what we try to do. And on that note, today there are a lot of cool people here. There's lots of speakers doing amazing stuff. They are talking about their itch, their scratch, the stuff that they spent months, potentially years doing. We've got amazing workshops. I've left alienate Steve because he is a machine. He's not a human or a workshop. He's just a machine. So he's on his own there. But I'm really looking forward, and I think it's an honor to be here. And that's what I say to everybody. We all need to be more hacker man. I'm sorry, this is gender inclusive. It was the Swedes. They're a bit different. I couldn't change the font. But thank you very much.